it's a very unique opportunity for me to be here in my birthplace and to give a lecture to students. This opportunity after I've had my 87th birthday just a few days ago, and after I've left Tyrol at my 18th birthday and practically never really returned to Tyrol at all. Now I'm here. So the first picture that you saw, the Tyrolean farmhouse, was the place where I grew up, and I had spent my primary education, my Volksschule, in the little village of Aufach in the village now during the war, because the place where we originally lived in Innsbruck was one of the first victims of bombing the town and was destroyed, and thus we had to move my mother and my sister and myself to this countryside, to her relatives in the village now, where I had my 6 years of primary education. And the only experience I remember from that time, which I in a way enjoyed very much, to live in a simple life and to have simple food, and during the horrible war that was destroying most of the European countries, in the valley of Wilchenau, there was no sign of a war. There was just simple farm life. But the only thing that I remember, which I didn't like, was when the Reichsdeutsche Lehrerin, the teacher, lady teacher we had in this primary school, because the men were all in war, so there were some young ladies who taught us. When at the entrance, when we entered the classroom, there we had to stretch our arm and greet her, with a very, very sort of distinct way. And this, in a way, invoked in me the feeling of resistance, because I didn't want to be forced to do something which I didn't understand why I had to stretch my arm and to say hello to this lady. So the other thing was when the priest took us to the church, and there we had to forcefully put the cross on our face, so that was the two things which I badly remember of my Tyrolean life in the country, and it took me my whole life to have a resistance towards politics and to have a resistance against religion. But other than that, I remember, the Tyrolean houses, the Almhütten, where I spent most of my time with the goats and the sheep and the cows, and particularly the Hütten für das Heu, wie sagt man, also die Heustadeln und all das. Was sagt sie? Louder. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, these simple structures, they evoked in me the wish to become an architect and to build something and to structure something. That was, I think it was the first initiative as a young boy, what my future profession ought to be. Later, when I finally came to Innsbruck for the intermediate school, to Untergymnasium, I remember the first confrontation with the buildings of Lois Welzenbacher, one of the examples you see here, and later on, I was very excited about the American Information Center at the edge of at the edge of Annichstraße and Marie-Theresienstraße. Oh God, it is difficult for me to use this computer. Go back. Yeah. No, 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 go back. No, no, not this is forward. We go back. No, no, we go back, please. We have to go back, back to start. No, but
I am going back.
yeah, computer is a problem for me. Whenever I touch it, it just doesn't work. No, no, this is wrong. It's completely wrong. Wrong. Go back.
I think I'm going back.
No,
Yes,
no.
it's back. One more.
One more back.
One more back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, now we are right.
Nimaya.
Yeah, no, that was the American Information Center at the Annichstraße, Marie-Theresienstraße, and I spent most of my free time there from school to go there and to watch the interesting papers and newspapers and books on architecture. And the first impression, which I never forget, was the house designed by Oskar Niemeyer, where I really got to know that Bauhaus with the straight lines could also be handled differently. And this was for me the first idea of a regional difference in architecture, that each region, each particular area had the possibility of interpreting architecture in their own special way. Now we go on. Yeah, I applied for, then after finishing my leaving examination in Tyrol, I applied for admission to the academy, where the master class for architecture was run by Lois Welzenbacher, who was not only an interesting personality and architect, but also very interested in urban design and urban planning. Thus, this example for his urban proposal for Antwerp was another sketch which I just brought with me to show him as an artist who really knew how to develop space. Next one, please. Yeah, but Welzenbacher died, unfortunately, at the first year of my studies, and Roland Reiner was his successor, who was known as a designer for sports halls and buildings like this. However, he was more known, please, next one, as a designer of urban areas. So he was, this is a proposal for Bratislava, a competition which he did. And there was another part of his teaching, which was at the time not so excited for us students, which was the study of anonymous architecture, of the old villages and old architecture examples of farmhouses and simple type of living. And as this here, where he proposed a book on anonymous architecture in northern Burgenland. Yeah, I left after finished my studies at the academy with Reiner. I left Vienna and I went to Germany, to Düsseldorf, where I participated in the work of architect Schneider Esleben and cooperated on competition projects, earned a lot of money, bought the first Porsche, I think it was 265 or something like that, and toured Europe, got to know Italy, France, and went finally to Holland, from where I took the SS Rotterdam to leave Europe and went to the United States, to New York. I had, before then, I had applied for a student scholarship at the GSD, at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard, where the year before a studio for urban design has been newly established. The first project which I did there was a project which was strongly involved with my studies of Jonah Friedman, whom I admired as a futurist thinker, and this was the first project which I designed for downtown Boston, and it was based basically on two elements. The one was, which I also used later on for my further projects, which was based on in one way on infrastructure, which means the access to space and with all the necessary elements as water, electricity, and communication, and so on. This was a separate system that was to be built on its own. And the other thing was the volume, and the volumes for the spaces to be used and to be for different purposes. They were, for my feeling, necessary to be established as sky rights. So there was no, for me, there was no need to build, to buy a piece of land. Land was never to be sold or never to be used by an individual or by a company or by someone, but land was only used by the public. And from there, the infrastructure, which was also public, was brought up to the sky. And in the sky, the sky rights were rented out to individuals, either for housing or for whatever. And these sky rights, they were especially, for instance, from this area to this area, from this to here, from here to there, there were certain height indications. So within this, the area was used to be for different purposes, but the whole building and the whole structure was something else. So that was very, very necessary for me to deal with this. But later on, this was only a first sort of architectural project, but I soon went to design and to think in terms of urban development. So this was one of the first ideas, was the linear type of town where two points were already existing, and these 2 points were interconnected by communication lines and used in the way that I have described before, with infrastructure and with sky rights. Right and left of it were spaces for production, for research, for working necessary, and there were across this linear system, there were secondary lines that went out to the open land, and in the open land there were habitats of individual character, where similar to the idea of villages, where people lived who tilled the land and who provided the necessary food and necessary needs for the people who lived in the linear town. The linear town, in this respect, was sited between a mountain, between a hilly area, and between a waterway, either the sea or the lake or whatever. So this were the two sides of the linear city across. And this project I was dealing with later on in a more detailed manner, and it shows here in the ground floor plan. It shows the basic infrastructure system. This is and it shows possibilities of using then the space above. this spaces above one element usually has about 4 floors. 4 floors to me were always the most useful scale for human beings, to use 4 floors. So these elements, there were a triple or 4 times or 5 times 4 floors that were ended up to a kind of a tower. But the important thing was that these towers never, and this is something that up to my latest times, I never accepted freestanding towers. Freestanding towers to me are criminal acts. They all have to be interconnected, horizontal interconnected, so that one can move from one tower to another. And that was very important, that this interconnection on the horizontal level really functions. Please, the next one. Yeah, these are diagrams that indicates exactly the system of secondary uses like big universities or research or types of secondary entertainment or whatever at the end of the linear town, and the linear town with the production centers right and left, and the secondary routes that cross over and interconnect the open land with this linear element. With this kind of system, and the systems were interconnected by underground pipes with high-speed transportation systems, a system that at that time was felt it was ridiculous. This could never happen, but now Elon Musk had shown that this is possible and that this system would work now. And this eventually led towards a general overview for my idea of a global city altogether. That means that the continents could be accessed by urbanization in such a way that linear systems would interconnect existing spots in such a way and interconnect each other via this underground pipeline system. Well, this was practically my magister work at the GSD, at the urban design class, and I was looking afterwards, very proud of these ideas. I was looking for a job, and I was introduced to Paul Wiener, who had a little small office in New York, by our dean, Jose Luis Sert, and he accepted me as a young student practitioner in his small office in order to make a proposal for the development of Aspen, Colorado. Aspen, Colorado at that time was very known with the Aspen Institute that was originated by an Austrian Bauhaus artist whose name was Konrad Bayer, and he knew Wiener also quite well, and so he was invited to make this proposal. I made a model and the ideas. I left the grid of the old gold seekers town more or less as in ruins, and as a garden structure, and built in the middle of the town a big machine which would in a way resolve all the needs for the people as to culture, production, energy, etc. And from there, a connection were to several substations, which again provided access with a diagonal railroad system like the Hungerburgbahn. How do you say in English? Yeah, Hungerburgbahn. The diagonal running streetcars, and the housing was no longer in the ground, but it was on the hillside of the mountains. So this was basically my idea, and it was presented by Paul Wiener and rejected immediately because the landowners of the ground floor land were against it because they felt it was not a commercially usable proposal. The next project was where I was accepted as a student practitioner, was at the office of Wallace Harrison. Wallace Harrison, I think you are familiar with him. He was, as a young man, he was one of the builders, of the designers of the Rockefeller Center, married to the Rockefeller family and had very good connections with the family still at that time. And Nelson Rockefeller asked him to make some proposals from Battery Park, which is downtown Manhattan, up to the World Trade Center. This area, which was the area where originally the piers for the landing of boats from Europe were existing. This was supposed to be land filled in and to add to the area of Manhattan. And on this land, Nelson Rockefeller wanted to have housing established. Now, my proposal was rather different. I made a proposal not to cut the piers, throw them into the Hudson River, and establish a floating kind of island, which is this sketch here, with concrete towers, sort of, and housing on top of those, and having the whole system, the whole floating island, interconnected with pipe system to the Manhattan subway. Now, this proposal, again, as you can guess, didn't appeal to Nelson Rockefeller, who felt that his property was thrown into the river and he couldn't make money out of it, and so I lost the second job as a futurist architect, as I felt I was, and then I went to lick my wounds and went to have a lunch at the beautiful garden courtyard of the Museum of Modern Art, and where there was a cafeteria, and where I used to go there because the office of Wallace Harrison was on right in Rockefeller Center, in the beautiful, most beautiful building and place in the city. And so I walked to the Modern Art Museum, where there was an Austrian architect again, whom I later on really got to know and to like very much. His name was Rudowski, Bernard Rudowski, and he had shown in this show Architecture Without Architects. And this show to me was of great stimulation. I remembered the original idea of Roland Reiner with the houses, simple houses in Burgenland. And I even remembered my little houses in the Tyrol, the Alm houses. And I saw that architecture in the simple way all over the world was actually something quite interesting and could be developed further in a more exciting way, also in the way for the future. And so I decided I would do some research on architecture, how to develop further the idea of anonymous architecture and urbanization in the developing world. And so on, yeah. One of the, then I went to the United, I was in a way invited at the United Nations Department of Habitat. And there was also the head of this department was a former collaborator of Le Corbusier, and he looked after me and tried to show me projects which I felt of some interest. And one of the projects I still remember very well was the project of Charles Correa, which was the UN-sponsored competition for housing in Peru. And this project, to me was a memorable idea of courtyard houses in a very simple way. And Charles Correa, with this project, became to me a person whom I later on became very close to, and we were very dear friends until his death some years ago. And he stimulated me very much to go on in this way. And I did further research, but one day the head of this UN Habitat department came and said, well, you should be ashamed as a young man looking at reports of other experts. Why don't you go out into the field and do your own research right there? And I said, well, yes, why don't you send me somewhere? And I said, he said, where do you want to go? And I said, I want to go to Tibet, because I was always excited about Tibet, as a young boy. And so he said one day, he said, no, Tibet is not possible because the Chinese won't cooperate with us. But again, after some time, he showed up and told me, well, if you really want to go someplace like this, then Nepal would be the most close place to Tibet, which I could offer you. So, but you have to decide right away, and in 2 weeks you have to be there. So, okay, I said, I'll take this opportunity, and I go to Tibet, to Nepal. And I got to know, for me, Nepal was a completely unknown territory, and I came there, and I realized that this area was jungle and down at the Indian border, and the hilly area, like in the alpine regions, and further up, a high mountain area, and finally all the way up above 8,000 meters, Arctic climate. So there were 5 different climatic zones in this country, and eventually the next one. And I was very much excited about how to access this country, because with my global city idea still in mind, I felt, well, how could I access Nepal with my global city? And I realized that the access with the Great Asian Highway, the red line, from New Delhi down to Bangladesh, and to further on was further along the Ganga River. And I felt, well, I have to make a proposal. Could be the next one. We have to make a proposal, first of all, to annex, to have a B line, a B alignment for the Asian Highway from Delhi all the way down there, and to cross the Nepal area. And then I went, when I was in Nepal, I took together with 3 other experts, one economist, one social geographer, and myself as a physical planner, and we went to study the various areas, valleys, down in this way from south to north up to the mountains. And we realized that there were 30 or more different tribes and different languages of people, and with different problems and different needs, and also different kinds of architecture. And this idea of having them cross over the B route of my Asian highway would mean that urbanization would take place at the crossing point of these various secondary routes. And this proposal I presented then to the National Planning Commission after a year having spent time in the mountains. And they were rather excited about this idea. And they felt this is a good idea. But United Nations, who sent me to make a plan for the capital, for the Kathmandu Valley, were not excited. And they said, no, we'll send somebody else who will do what we want, to make a plan for the Kathmandu Valley, and not to make research for a global city, for for all together. But meanwhile, the Nepalese government and the National Planning Commission in Nepal was rather excited about this idea of intermingling with these various folk groups, that to create one unity and to have them, because so far the economy of the country functioned that once a year the experts of the world wie sagt man da, die Weltbank, the World Bank, yeah, the World Bank and of other agency came to the Kathmandu Valley and entered the palace of the king and delivered some money, which was partially kept in the palace, and the other part was delivered to some ministries, but none of the money or of the needs were ever distributed into these regions. So the people down there, they just didn't get any. So we were asking these people to define their needs and their demands, what they need, water or education or whatever. And so with this idea, we came to the capital and we presented this. And this was certainly for a time when democracy was at its beginning, because at that time there was still the absolute monarchy with the king as a godlike figure. He was treated as Vishnu, as a god. So there was really very little chance to break up the system in a democratic manner. But still, there was something that there was a chance. And however, I was asked by the UN, if you want to come back again, you only have to treat the Kathmandu Valley. So I decided, okay, I leave the other projects pending and I'll keep an eye on this development, but I will treat the Kathmandu Valley now in a very logical way. So the Kathmandu Valley is a place, it's like a bowl-shaped type of valley of 20 by 25 kilometers approximately, and surrounded by hills of 3,000 meters height. So that's small hills, 3,000 meters altogether, and the height of the valley is about 1,500. So it's a slight raise from the Indian territory. The next one, and there were three major towns, and the edge of the valley, as this little boy faces, are the view of the 8,000 high Himalayas. Now I am just showing a few photos of this unique area of Kathmandu Valley, which I think most of you are not familiar with. This is one of the towns, a very compact town, facing outside and facing inside. It means outside and inside is very clearly defined, and facing the Himalayas in the back. Now, next one, the street that enters the town, and the little herberge, how do you say herberge? Overnight stands, yeah, like a small inn, yeah, which you don't have to pay for, but it's for visitors who would come to town, who could stay there overnight and then enter the town and do their business there and come back. So this is a typical street then when I arrived at Kathmandu Valley, and the typical houses. Next one. And in order to go out from the town, you have small bridges, and these women taking the food out to the men who work in the fields. The people living there in the houses are mostly farmers. This is a farming town, as all the towns used to be in old times. Yes, next one. This is the central place the royal place in the center of the town with the figures and temples and meeting of people. Next one. And some of the temples are quite big, and their pyramid sort of stands are used by the people for gathering and for ceremonies. So there are a few more pictures of the towns, the little calles, the little streets, business is handled, and this is a view of the houses from above with all brick buildings and brick structures. Next one, a plan. I surveyed the first plan for a cluster of houses with courtyards and simple structures, all alike. Simple brick houses, wooden beams for the ceilings, and yeah, next one. And a typical house form with on the ground floor either shops or animals or storage, and the upper floor bedrooms, and the next floor for working places and for gathering and etc. And with balconies looking out to the street and taking part of the life of the street. And the last floor under the roof, the kitchen, open up either as a terrace to the open sky, and there was also always was a small temple, a small prayer room. And the important thing was that the food preparation always on top, where open fire was made, and the smoke and went out into the open. So this was the typical house type for the entire houses in the valley. But the most exciting to me was not so much the architecture, but was the environment. And the environment was created by man as manifold terraces with myriads of small water canals and waterways, how the water was guided into the various terraces where the rice to be grown. And this shows that the area part during the time when the rice was planted. The next one shows you the rice growing almost and different tones of green of the various growing stages of the rice. The next one is shortly before the harvest, the area becomes all yellowish orange. So it is a fantastic feeling of a huge land art piece that produces the life for thousands of people by providing rice, as the basic means of survival. The next one, which I liked most, was the after the rice has been harvested, the terraces have to be recut. That means because of growing all kind of stuff in between, it is necessary to use this instrument, we say haue, which is a simple metal cutting device with a wooden stick, where they cut the edges of the terraces. This has to be done once a year, for the entire valley. So this is a true land art feeling that you get. Well, since I realized that the work there would take some more time than I had anticipated, I had to build my own house, which is a simple house with a courtyard and a garden, and made of wooden bricks, of bricks, of clay bricks and wooden beams. And next one, thank you so much. Yeah, and this is a interior, very simple interior, and and me and my young family at my house, at my own house, and now. Yeah, and then I started to think in terms of the development of the valley. So if the valley is this showing here, with the towns and the major villages and important sites surrounding the valley, within the valley, I was worried about that this would happen, which you see this ugly octopus, which in a way stretches out its dangerous arms for the land and for the development of this beautiful land art terraces. So this was my horror vision, and I was telling to the government that we have to do everything not to derive at this particular problem. Next one. Now, after some 50 years after I've left Kathmandu, this has happened. So it's the horror vision has been realized, and they've stuck to this, and now the valley is gone. It's destroyed. So this is the face as it looks now. But at that time, I didn't believe in that this would happen really. I still had the hope, or the next one, yeah, the intention to do everything that would avoid. So I said, I made stage plans, but go on now. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I had the idea. There's a sort of a visionary picture of how I could think of developing the edges of the valley towards the hills, and having the valley itself kept as it was originally. So the drawing here shows the round dots. That was new developments at the edge of the valley, and keeping the central part of the valley untouched. Next one. So I started to make an inventory of important places within the valley, which definitely have to be maintained and which are obligatory to be part of the World Heritage System, because I felt they were of such great importance that they really should be named World Heritage. And this proposal I submitted to the UNESCO, and they were very excited about it, even though this has never happened before. It was a kind of utopian idea of mine that a live region to be declared as a World Heritage Site, because they usually only have small sites or respective areas or part of a town or something, but an alive region to declare, that was completely unknown. But I invited the Director General of UNESCO to come to Kathmandu, to the valley, and I showed him the actual fact, and he was so excited about it. That was, at that time, it was a very interesting and noble man. His name was René Maheu, that time Director General of UNESCO, and he agreed to this proposal, and he said, well, and I said, well, but the government seems not to be too happy about my idea of doing research of all the historic and the cultural and artistic places within the valley. And so I need some help from you. And I demanded that one of the professors of mine from Harvard and another professor from Cambridge University from England to be as my advisors, to come and to tell the government the need to do this work, which I had in mind. And this has actually happened. And so I could continue. I had a small staff of few people, 8 people, with them and an old Russian Jeep. And with him, I toured around the valley and researched all the various places. And eventually, next one. Eventually, yeah, and now we go through. This is one of the towns here, which were declared definitely as important sites. Next one, and another town center with an exciting structure of palaces and temples areas. Next one. So these are sites within the area, within the valley, isolated sites, which were very important, cultural sites, monument sites. Next one, yeah, and smaller towns like this one, the towns all had specific functions. This town, for instance, was the town for clay production. It means pots and this sort of thing in clay. So they produced for the whole valley this type of needs, and others were of different production, specialized. So all the villages and all towns, small towns, had their special function, and I declared this and made this very definite about the importance of continuing in this way. Go on. Yeah, but I then established a small office for myself in order to show the government and the people there how I felt that the new buildings, which I thought they could develop at the edge of the valley, how they could look like. Because I wanted also to give examples of contemporary architecture based on their original building methodology and their original styles. And so I designed here an institutional building, which actually I had in mind that this was to be for those people from the various parts of the country, from the tribal chiefs, that they would come to the Kathmandu Valley and they would be living here and they would be taught how to speak up within the parliament, speak up in terms of their needs, of their wishes. So in order to teach them democracy, that was sort of the back of my idea. So this building, in a way, was the first building which I designed and built. And I got the money from Ford Foundation. They gave me some money and I built it. The whole building cost $100,000. So yeah. So here in the section you see on the surface, these were the housing places for these villagers to come and spend time here, and the round buildings were the auditorium and the teaching areas and the administration with library and all kinds. And the lower part underneath the triangular building were the kitchen and dining and so on, living needs for those people. Go on. So yeah, next one. Again, you see the living areas with the little terraces, the major auditorium and the conference halls, everything built in brick with the local. Yeah, here again, the original terraces still maintained. Go on. And this was the view of the building then, sort of fitted into the natural topography of the terrace structure. So in this way, I felt also, in order to confer with the mountains and the hills and all that, and the building was facing diagonally the other parts of the valley. There was one photo where one could see it a little bit, but I forgot now which was it. It was which is exactly facing the Swayambhu temple, which was the oldest Buddhist shrine of the valley, which according to legend were the original, it was an island within the lake, and this was the original of the culture of the Kathmandu Valley. So continue. Yeah. Yeah, here you see, this is the Swayambhu temple. There you saw it in the distance. Yeah, in the distance there, in the edge here, this was the temple of Swayambhu, which was here. So you see the diagonal facing directly this side. Next one. Then I was asked by a women organization who were worried that all the young men were gathering around their houses and causing nuisance, smoking hash, and so I should make some herberge, some sort of a hostel for them that they could stay outside in a small place like in a village, and they called this the Star Village. So I designed this little village with their individuals, small houses, again, similar to the little house which you saw in the first photo, entering the town where people used to stay overnight. So this is one of the small village. Next one. Yeah, the house itself was very simple, but it contained area, a little table for dining, a sleeping area, a small place where you could cook, and a bathroom, shower, and so on. And the structure, very simple structure, with vaulted brick walls. Next one. This is how it looked like. Then we just go on, and next one. And again, I faced this little village to the stupa of Bodhnath, which is this Buddhist stupa which you just saw before. Here you see how it fits, the houses fit into the terraces, into the natural terraces further on. Yeah. It was a communal building. And meanwhile, this was built in 1972, I think, and meanwhile the building was rotten and it was no use anymore because they built a Hyatt hotel nearby and they used it for the workers and they neglected it quite badly. But then a young lady from India came and fell in love with these houses, and she happened to be the niece of the richest, of the most important steel man in the world. What is his name? Mittal, yes, of Mittal. And she spent a little money to restore the whole lot of the village, and now it became Architecture Museum of Nepal. So this is now the end of this story. Yeah, yeah. This is one room as it used to be. And this is now. Now it is restored and it's now an architecture museum. So next one. Yeah, and then I went from that. Then something happened, you know, when I had finished almost all the research for the important places in the entire valley, which means not only the towns and temples and important places, but also individual 888 individual buildings I researched. I drew up plans and photographs and researched about them, their meaning. And once I had finished all that, before it had to be gone into printing, I was informed by a high police officer at a party in my house. I had to be careful because the secret police of the king would come next day to my house and confiscate all the research of all these places, because the king and his crew, they were selling these artifacts to the outside, and they were making a lot of money with it. So they were not excited about the idea that I made an inventory of all the important places, and the UNESCO would in a way make this to become heritage. So I rushed with my car in nighttime with the 2 boxes of research material to the American ambassador. I knew her quite well, and and I told her to take the boxes on her diplomatic plane, which would come once a week to Kathmandu, and to take it to Delhi, and from there to Paris, and to deliver it personally to the Director General René Maheu. And she did this. It was done right away. And next day, when the secret police came and wanted to confiscate my research, there was just a few things left over, and they just ignored it, and they said, well, maybe this was just a story that Pruscha had made a big collection of something, And so finally, however, I was in danger, and I was sort of felt uneasy about the whole thing, and I said bye-bye, Nepal, and I left. And I came to Vienna, and something strange happened in Vienna. I was called by Minister Firnberg, who was the culture minister, and she said, "Oh, you're wonderful that you came to see me, because René Maheu was visiting me the other day, and we had a dinner in Schönbrunn, and he was sitting next to me and was telling me about you and your work in Nepal, and that you had done some fantastic research, and that we are very interested to have this printed, but we have to be careful that the Nepalese government is not getting hold of it." So, and he couldn't do it in UNESCO, because UNESCO, the Nepalese delegates sit there as well, and they could have snatched this away. So it was a criminal story in a way, and he sent all the material to Minister Firnberg, and Firnberg told me, oh, and you supervise the printing and the production of the catalog, and so I did this. These are the 2 volumes, the big volumes about this size, and very very heavy volumes. One is the one is Kathmandu Valley 1, contains my proposal for the preservation of the Kathmandu Valley as a World Heritage Site, and the other one was more than 888 individual monuments which were here in this book. So then next one. Yeah, and I did this, and it was printed, and it was taken by the ambassador in India, who was the father, the fine man, the father of the present bit strange Austrian foreign minister, Schallenberg. You have seen him perhaps in television. Seems not to be smart, not too smart, but the father was wonderful. He went with my books to the king and wanted to present it, but they didn't want to receive it. They felt, well, this was hot stuff, and we don't want to have anything to do with it. And so he left without having it handed over to Nepal. So the book was gone. So then I was surprised what happened to the book, because there were more than 1,000 copies were printed by this printer whom Firnberg paid for, and since the Nepal government didn't want it, they were just left. But one day I visited the office of Coop Himmelblau, and that was the building where my printer was originally located, and the Scholl Verlag was there. So I went there, and they told me, Wolf told me, you go downstairs, there is a model, our model workshop, and you see what fantastic models we are building. And I went and looked at the models, was very interesting. But then I saw in the basement, there was some space, left space, and I walked there, and all of a sudden I found big piles of printed matter. And I took up some of the prints, and this was my inventory. 1,000 copies of inventory were hidden in next to the model shop of Wolf Brix, of Tom Himmelblau. So I said, well, I asked, whom does this belong to? Nobody really, you can have it, So I asked the government and the Nepal government whether they want to have it, whether they want to keep it, and they said, nobody showed any interest. So I took it and I gave it to a printer because it was not bound. They were just simple printed sheets. Yeah. So then the printer said, well, it would cost about 3,000 euros to bind it. And I said, okay, the government should now, because it's owned by the government, the Austin, they should have it bound, and we'll have to send it to Nepal. And however, the officer, the government, the UNESCO officer, his name was Maldona. He's a South Tyrolean character, and he couldn't get anything done. And eventually the printer went bankrupt, and so the whole thing was lost again. So then I got really mad. I said, well, 10 years of my life was just gone in this way. So then I asked the new minister, whose name was Osten, what is his name? The new minister, Ostermeyer, yeah, the one who was responsible for the Corinthian name table. Sorry, and he said, sure. I told him the whole story, and he said, sure, that it's ridiculous. We pay for it, has to be reprinted. So I found an Austrian fellow who was living in Nepal, Mr. Schromm, whom I gave one copy, and he went with the one copy, get it, scanned. He got the whole thing scanned and went to India, got it printed again, and had it printed in a bit smaller scale than the original, but it was printed, and it's sold in Nepal. And that was very necessary because meanwhile in Nepal there was an earthquake. So most of the surveyed elements which I had in the catalog were destroyed by the earthquake. So that was the only memory of all that was now in my book again. So everybody was happy and I was happy too. I don't know whether it's of any use, but anyway, it gives me the feeling of gratitude that something. But meanwhile, Firnberg and the government said, why? Because the UNESCO wanted me to go to Yemen and to do some work there for the Sana restoration. And then but Firnberg said, no, you stay here and you apply for a professorship, which eventually there was a demand for a professorship at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. And I then, but it took more than a year. Meanwhile, I did my PhD at Graz University. And then eventually the collegium finally voted me to become a professor at the Academy, which I accepted. And there was no space for me because the professor, everybody had his space in the Hansen building, and each and every place was used either for a toilet or for storage, but no place for me to have a room. So then I said to Firnberg, look, there's no space for me. Do you mind if I make my own space? So she said, yes, where you would do it? I said, well, there is one tower here. This is this tower that Hansen built as an attic, but there's nothing inside. I said, well, I'm using this tower. If you don't mind, it costs about 4,000 or something. Yes, okay. There you have it. So then I got the money, and then after some summer, meanwhile I had made the drawings how to structure this steel structure and so on. And we had a structural engineer, one of the professors, Titel, who also died meanwhile, who made the structural calculations. And then during summertime, when all the professors were on leave, we fixed up this new tower, you know. So when one of my colleagues, who was a great friend of mine, Mr. Speichel, he was a very important architect in Austria, and even more important, he was a caricaturist, and he knew how to deal with politicians. When he came back, and he was shocked to see that Prussia had now a studio of its own in the tower. You know, but this is how life is. You know. So next one. So yeah, coming. So this was my tower, you know, which as it looked like, you know. And I don't know whether it's still there or not. I haven't been there in more than 10 years, but next one. Yeah, and there I started my teaching time, and one of the highlights for my teaching was the study of anonymous architecture and town planning in the developing world. And here you see some of the students traveling. You see yourself also somewhere sitting on the, yeah. Which one? Oh, I see. I see. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You see. You see, now you know. Now you see how I look like. I was that time I was a bit younger. Now I'm quite old, but still it's the same. But here, shows me, and next one, with some of the students, and we looked at many of these anonymous architecture structures all over the world, you know, and particularly in remote areas, which I think was my most liked field of interest. But we certainly also looked at contemporary architecture, as in South America or in Mexico or Chile, or yeah, just we go on just to show some ideas of anonymous buildings. These are all clay structures. Yeah. I should certainly, oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Now, back to Vienna, I didn't really intend to have an office, an architectural office in Vienna, or to do architecture in Vienna, because really the demands didn't interest me at all. And but there were 3 projects which I was excited, which was this one, the building in the background that was built by Maximilian II, and it's a manneristic structure. It's a kind of a research institute which he established. Here he is with his sons, Matthias and Rudolf, and the Danube is passing by. At the edge of the Danube, there was a hill, and on top of this hill, he built this research institute. And there he had the most important artists and scientists of his time to discuss problems, world problems, we would say ecological and psychological and whatever problems, physical, and it was really a far-sighted utopian idea of a new place. but since he died with only 40 some years, and his son went to Prague and left it, and eventually the uncultured Maria Theresia, she destroyed it and took out the most important parts in order to build the Gloriette and some of the parts of Agli Schönbrunn, and this most beautiful building, which is unique in Europe, which only could be compared to the Palazzo del Te in Mantua, perhaps. But this is more interesting and more bigger. So this interested me very much. But so I made many plans, and since the viewpoint of the building was to look down to the Danube, which no longer was possible because that was cut off, I turned the building to the other side and made a forum for a meeting place in front next door. Meanwhile, however, the city of Vienna, which owns the building, so I opened the building up here and opened the beautiful spaces, halls here, established in this as a theatrical arena, and had steps and the cover of it facing this area where the crematorium, where the Holzmeister built the crematorium in here. This was actually a pleasure garden with experimental fruits and trees and agriculture for at the time of Maximilian, and now it is used as a how do you say Urnenfriedhof.
A cemetery for urns.
Yeah, it's used as a, so I took out part of this urn and removed them, which the owners of the urns perhaps were not so happy, and I built this arena here in order to face the building from the other side, but it was never really taken so serious. And the other project was, for me, there were three projects which I was interested in Vienna from the beginning on. The other project was the Nahnturm, which is the Fool's Tower, and which was built by Joseph II in part of the hospital of the Central Hospital of Vienna. And at that time, the rector of the university, Ibn Bauer, was a close friend of mine. He called me and said I should help him how to develop this campus as a university campus. But I said, no, this is not really my cup of tea. But the only place which I am interested is the Fool's Tower. Give me the Fool's Tower. I want to make some idea, to develop some idea with the Fool's Tower. So he said, okay, you take the Fool's Tower. So which I took, and eventually I got even from the son of the minister, well, it doesn't matter. Der Sohn des Komponisten. Well, anyway, let's go on. Yeah, von einem, yeah. He gave me the order to make proposal for the Fool's Tower. So the Fool's Tower, I wanted to develop the cells for where previously the poor fools were living in. I wanted to develop these cells for researchers who PhD candidates or for research people who would come from anywhere in the world and who want to have a working space and who want to cooperate with some of the university institutions and to be here. And since some of them were already perhaps grown and they had a family, I also planned a small kindergarten next to it, so underground. So that was further down. And this were the next one. And the idea was, yeah, so the idea was that all these cells would eventually become places, working places for scientists. Next one. And I made proposals for a design of furniture within these little cells, and the furniture should be, they should look like a space shuttle sort of, that you, when you enter, you have everything metal and aluminum and very simple. And so and no memory of the old tools from the past, but very modern looking cells, and the table at the table there was a place for the computer, because I assumed that every scientist had his own computer. And the idea was that as soon as they put the computer there and switch on the computer, a antenna would stick out underneath the window 2 meters. Show me the next photo. And eventually one would recognize that the building is being inhabited again. So this eventually the building would look like an eagle, like yeah. So that was my idea. But then Einem was no longer minister, and the next minister was a lady who was expert in Strickmuster. What do you say? Knitting. Yeah, from Vorarlberg. She was a knitting minister, and she couldn't understand the idea that I was putting the scientists into this building. So my contract was gone, cancelled. Next one. Oh yeah, but the third was the only project which I realized, and I was made myself as the owner, as the architect, and as the controller. Yeah, because I was the rector of the academy, and since the academy only had relatively small rooms where the students had maybe small easels for making paintings and whatever, and they wanted I wanted them to increase. Oh, it's okay. To increase their activities and to make big projects and projects out in the open space, and so I needed big spaces, and the only place which had these big spaces was the depot for the Royal Theaters, which Gottfried Semper designed as his last work before he left Vienna in vain and died in Rome, after he had enough trouble with his partners and with the Viennese in general. So this building, which had a very strange shape according to the site, fascinated me very much, and I took it. It was almost ordered to be taken away because it was owned by the Technical University, and they built a new institution building, and they wanted to enlarge the institution building and to dismantle this. And I went to the minister, and meanwhile, most important Austrian architects had made proposals how to change this building, how to make use of the building, and none of them succeeded. Then I went to the minister, at that time Busek, and asked him, could I have the building? He said, well, all the Viennese architects have not succeeded. Why do you think you know how to do this? I said, just give me a chance, I'll do it. And he said, well, if you find a way to have the monument protection office on your side and the Brandschutz, how do you say fire protection also on your side, then you can have it. And I found a way how to do it, because I made the whole ground floor in water, and I put in sprinklers and so on, and I made an extra staircase how people could flee the building. So, and then I made an auditorium in the center here, and extended the roof up to the normal size, and I made it to become a real beautiful building. And next one. And I had a wonderful team together with my assistant, Mr. Mulic, and with architect Müller, who was doing a lot of supervising projects, and he supervised the project which we finished within the cost estimation and within the time limit. And this was my design. The actual design was the staircase, because I had to make a new staircase in order, if there is some danger, that everybody could flee in time the building, because the building had no decent staircase at all. Next one. Yeah, but no, this we saw already. Next one. Yeah, this is one of the working spaces for the students. Then I put in here another gallery with the sanitary rooms underneath and with storage spaces for here, and working spaces for the students, and air conditioning and whatever necessary. And then this was the three conservation projects which I was excited to do in Vienna, and I was only successful with one. But then then another part of architecture, which I was always interested since my studies of anonymous architecture, was habitat. And since the city of Vienna had since the 30s two different systems of housing. One was the Otto Wagner style high rise. The other one was the low style with low Siedlungshouses. And I was more interested in the low style, low housing, and I designed some of the row houses as this. And this was to be taken interesting enough to invite me together with Raymond Abraham for a competition to design another settlement of small scale houses. The next one. Well, I took loan from the courtyard houses from the Islamic architecture, which always fascinated me and which I think are really the most excellent and most interesting design elements for housing. Next one. And I designed this square housing system with singular housing types with courtyards. This was next one. A single type of housing, together. And the idea was actually to have the house, which we will see later, again, more specific. When Loos proposed his house with one wall, so I proposed the house with a crooked wall, with one wall in the corner. Yeah. And so the houses all had this two walls. And the idea was to have all the rooms built in prefabricated wooden elements. However, at that time, the city of Vienna said, well, we don't finance Baracken because barracks, because they are in wood. Wood is not a building material which we accept. Now they even built a high rise which I think is most stupid, but they produce high rise in wood. And with me, they didn't even agree to have three floor houses in wood. So next one. Yeah, there's the floor plan. You see how it works. Really very intricate system of housing with courtyards. Next. Yeah, so yeah, here you see the built element. The bricks were concrete bricks colored with brick, grinded brick. So they became the color of bricks. So it looked very nice. The next one. And that's from the outside. You don't see anything. Outside is only walls, like in the Islamic city. You have only walls, and the entrance where you enter, and you have light from above, and you have courtyards. Next. Yeah, again this colored bricks, concrete bricks, and then the entrance with the light down into the courtyard. Yeah, well, this was one of my favorite projects, and well, there's one more photo to show the entire settlement. There you see, this is my square which I designed, and this is Raymond Abraham with his row houses. Here, it's similar row houses. Next one. And after then, I realized that the city of Vienna was sponsoring and favored of wood as a building material for housing. I made proposal. I called it quadrangle housing, and I made the proposal to reuse my original design for the Intersdorf, for the settlement there in wood. And well, they were all very excited. They said it's very nice, it's very interesting. And I made several exhibitions. It was also shown at the Architect Center in Vienna and at the Museum of Applied Art and at several places. I would say almost all over the world, it was shown, but nobody was excited about it. You know, the last was when Wolf showed it to the people in Saudi Arabia, and they smiled and said, "Well, this was our grandfathers who lived there. we like the 500-meter glass walls, you know. So forget it, forget him." So but continue. Uh, just let's go. But this shows now the two walls. You know, no, it doesn't matter. Go on. I don't want to bore you all with my. Yeah, go on. Just go on. It gets boring for you, I think. But yeah, the infrastructure, the system, and on, go on, go on. There's one more, yeah. There's one more a video which Wally Mazzini did. Yeah, this one. Can you try it? That it will just take a few minutes, and which shows maybe. That's fine. This shows the entire well, faster now. But it will be over in a minute. Just can you still hold it? Oh yeah, this is the courtyard, and the colored elements are open wings for ventilation. The rest is just glass. And the ground floor is an open area, which people could use any way they want. It replaces the cellar in a way. It's open. And the upper floor is for living, and as in the hall, the top floor is for living and for kitchen and for the terrace. That's why a very well-known Austrian lady architect was blaming me. I'm the most anti only female architect of all hospitals. But I have the kitchen at the top floor. Sure. She obviously has not yet known that that's not the. So you see, this is the idea of the housing. And I've been still looking after someone who wants to build it. So the south is, I think, I can get. Oh, that's too long. I think you got an idea of what it is all about. We could close. Yeah. Thank you so much. Now, but there's still going on.
You have more, right?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
Was sagst du, Eva? Ich soll aufhören.
Noch das Haus in Nepal zeigen.
Ah, nein,
Haus
nicht.
von der Wallis, ne?
No,
Oder?
no.
Das noch zeigen. Oh, mal ein bisschen forward.
Ah, this is my favorite project in a way. I don't want to lose this. This is I took part in a competition for the Vienna Museum Quarter, and the Museum Quarter. But let's continue. Yeah, let's cut it off. Just show it the base. Yeah, the Museum Quarter. My proposal was to have a conch, I call it, where the art of today is exhibited, and from there a tunnel underground goes into the mountain there behind the museum quarter, and until the tower, the big Flakturm. Yeah, and there are several secondary pipes going into different directions where the art of yesterday is being stored, because I know that museums always are in search of depot space. And so I created here, instead of a museum, I created ein Schatzhaus der Kunst. So the art is being stored underground in the back of Vienna there. And the art of today is shown every day, separate, differently, and the people could go down to exhibition halls and see the mixture of art of yesterday and art of today, and eventually go up with an elevator on top of the tower, and from there they look at the actual museum at the city of Vienna. That was my concept. Again, the concept was wonderful, but only very few people really gasped for it and understood the importance of this project. And the only building, and I left all the buildings as they were before changing. All these new museums were built. They were already buildings during the Baroque time, and I left them as they were. The only building which I reduced, which I eliminated, was the building of the Reithalle of Kaiser Franz Josef, which was the only building which now is being maintained. And they are put on the Denkmalschutz, which is a stupid building from the turn of the century. But anyway, that was the project. The only thing was that this project, the model was put into the Museum of Applied Art, and there it sits in the basement. And the next one was the One World Foundation, which was established by friends of ours, by Joseph Ortner and Katrin Messner in Sri Lanka. And after so long having not lived in Asia anymore, I decided I would go back to Asia and eventually build myself a house to die there for the old age. And so I went there, and the tsunami came and eliminated the school that they built, and I had to build a new school. So we collected money, and we got some 200,000 euro, and with this money I built this new school. So this is the school for more than 1,000 students now, and it works very well, and it really is a very simple structure consisting of concrete slabs, concrete columns, and fill-in lightweight brickwork with cross ventilation all over. This is the school. And in order to maintain the school, I had to build some bungalows to be rented out to tourists or to friends of the One World Foundation who would stay there for a while. That was the section sketch which I built for myself. Oh, show me one more the photo before. Yeah, this is the house we built for ourselves, by myself, and we are staying there part of the year in this little house and on a lagoon. There's a lagoon. Very simple house, but built on stilts in the air. So when the tsunami came, it went through the building, but it didn't destroy it because it was built on stilts in the air. So this is another bungalow I built also up in the air, two bungalows again with a metal roof and up and space in between, and then the bungalow, wooden bungalow, and whatever the heat on the roof would come not down because there is always wind passing through and carrying the heat off. So this is these are the bungalows, the two, and I built this is the entrance, communal space here, and the interior very nice, very simple. And this is now the house for Wali's mother, and it is this time I built it a bit higher, sort of the columns are something like 6 to 8 meters, you see here, and the terrace sticks out, and you have the view across the trees here. Here is the inside with all the louvers open, and the view from the terrace across the trees to the Indian Ocean. That's it.